the times that we're in is one of a kind for many of us in our lifetimes. This is one of a kind. We've never seen anything like this in the past. Uh, it is extremely difficult indeed, and we're in the early days of the tough times. Yeah, so things, a lot of pundits and advisors are projecting or predicting that things will get worse economically across the globe. Now, what does it mean for GCC or for MENA as a region? Some of the research institutes are predicting that we will degrow across GCC, various countries in the GCC. We will degrow by anywhere between 0.8, 0.7% to 1.5%, across various countries. And some of the industries are in the direct line of impact. For example, airlines, tourism. These are two industries which are in the direct line of impact because all the airlines are grounded across the globe. Borders are closed. Tourism has taken a huge impact. We're all, quarantined, sitting at home. We're not even allowed to go to work, let alone, going out for vacations or tourism. And then you have the other industries such as retail, real estate. So these are some of the industries which are in the direct line of impact. These industries have seen impacts immediate. We're seeing the impact. The revenues are declining. The profitability is already taking a hit. We're just in the Q1 of the calendar year. And then you have these, related industries in the second, line of impact, and then the tertiary line of impact. Those industries will see the impact in the subsequent in the coming months as these industries stop the procurement or purchases. The secondary and the tertiary industries will all take a hit as we move forward. And if the situation continues into May without any sort of improvement in economic stability, things are going to get even more difficult going forward. The reason why I'm giving you this background or setting the context is that all of these things have emphasized on one thing when it comes to IT, when it comes to enterprise, which is all the businesses, all the IT departments across the globe are scrambling to find, to save their budget or reprioritize the budget into the critical projects that are essential for now in the current situations. Yeah. So what we see are set of requirements, business requirements evolving because of the current paradigm shift. For example, we're all working from home. That has put in a lot of emphasis in coming up with cloud-based collaboration platforms, digital security associated with these working from home or remote workers, enabling these remote workers. Associated security, requirements have started popping up. Virtual desktop interface, VDIs, workspaces. A lot of these conversations have also popped up. So at the beginning of the year, IT wouldn't have factored budget for these things. We did not anticipate the situation. We would be in this situation. Hence, what they're looking at is how do I do the cost optimization across various areas to save some money, so I could redirect that funds in doing these initiatives because it's essential in current difficult times. So what we propose or what we want to share our thoughts with you are that it's not going to be business as usual. Yeah, it's very clear and evident. So what we require is as an IT function, we need to be able to manage the paradigm shift. Like for example, work from home, right? we need to make sure that the productivity is not impacted. The workforce productivity is not impacted, right? So we need to manage the paradigm shift. We also need to look at the fault tolerance strategies, because, for example, you're managing your data center, you have a hardware failure. While the supply chain across the globe has been severely impacted, there's huge amounts of disruptions, there are delays. Consignments supposed to be delivered in 5 to 6 weeks. Now, we're talking about 2 to 3 months at best case scenario. So, in case if you have any sort of outage or any kind of disruption towards your critical business application, how do you handle that? Fault tolerance. Or how do you build fault tolerance? So you keep your core business application up and running. So we need to rethink our strategies towards fault tolerance. We also need to look at uh, broad technology competencies, because you're dealing with multiple components, various different technologies. So you need somebody to support you across all different technologies, somebody who's competent across all of these technologies. And then comes your how do you go about putting all of these in place. Do we do it sequentially, or do we run them parallelly? So you require a kind of a multi-pronged approach, wherein when you're looking at cost optimization, you're not looking at just from an infrastructure standpoint, but also from the aspects of licensing. How do I save money by optimizing on my license costs or support costs? So you require a multi-pronged approach, and then you also need to look at automation and tools that will help you implement automation. So a lot of things that are done manually, you need to look at ways to optimize it so you could decrease your cost. So you need somebody to support you with automation and the associated tools. So this is where, as Citrus, we continue to help our customers across various technologies. We're not someone who just go in and do a sort of a simple lift and shift type, migrations, but rather we do a consultative work with our customers. We help them across the board, be it your underlying infrastructure on the data center, or your application, or your business continuity, or even to the extent of managing your end users. Yeah. So this is where with our strong, competent workforce, we're able to help our customers to support or help them to get through these difficult times. Now, um, how do we do the cost optimization? What does it even mean? Let me start with the fundamentals or the foundation. So when you look at traditional infrastructure, so for some of you it might look like I'm talking to a convert, or I'm preaching the choir. But for the benefit of the rest of the folks, let me start with the fundamentals. Yeah. Why hyperscalers, why cloud makes more sense in these difficult times. So you look at traditional infrastructure today. If you have to commission an asset, or an IT infrastructure for a business application, you got to look at various components. Let's start with compute, right? So you're looking at putting together a server for a business application. Now you need to consider the fault tolerance. You need to consider high availability. So that you bring in two nodes, right? And then the associated storage, and associated backup. Now all of you got to connect all of these together. So you need to bring in the network infrastructure. You're putting top of the rack switches, and you're putting patch panels, and you're putting core switches, and you're putting it all together, right? So they can talk to each other. The database server can talk to the application server. The application server can talk to the front end web tier. Now you have your compute, storage, and network workloads. Now you need to secure all of these. So then you bring in your security components, things like your firewalls and IDS, IPS devices. So the requirement, or your assets is slowly sort of growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So All of these in turn translates into sort of a capex in terms of overheads. You taking the responsibilities or liabilities of managing your underlying hardware infrastructure, um, and more importantly, when you commission an infrastructure, you got to consider your growth for the next 3 years or 5 years, depending on how you do your TCO ROI calculation within your organization. So now you're talking about building capacity for the future requirements for your future growth. So you're talking about 3 years, 5 years of additional CPU, memory, storage. So all of these things sort of adds up. And then last but not the least, you got to have an army of people, workforce to manage your compute resources, storage resources, security resources, network resources, so on and so forth. So all of these things, and if you look at it, sort of adds up and gives you a huge cost in terms of managing your IT budget, capex as well as opex. Now, fast forward, if you look at the hyperscalers like AWS, a lot of those things are kind of abstracted and taken away from your sort of shoulders. So the load is now passed on to the hyperscalers. Hyperscalers manage all of these underlying infrastructure, and with their economies of scale, you're able to now um, ride on it and get the cost benefits. So uh, as simple as for example, if you want to run a small workload for a simple $100 a month, you swipe a credit card, start your instances. Now you've got the underlying network infrastructure taking care of the security infrastructure, taking care of your compute, storage, backup. All of these things are taken care of. Of course, there is a shared responsibility between the AWS um, uh, and the customers. So even with that case, the responsibilities what customers take care of compared to a traditional data center scenario, it is far and few. So this is what you would when you compare a traditional data center and the cloud infrastructure. This is where you see a huge sort of cost benefit, and especially in the current scenario, doing a cost optimization in managing your IT infrastructure or managing your IT budget. This itself will give you a huge sort of a boost and a cost saving benefits. Now, how do generally customers who have already gone ahead and adopted the uh, the cloud motion, how do they uh, manage and lower their TCO? Yeah. So let's just when they start with workload migration from the data center to cloud, um, generally they look at are we over provisioning? Um, so they move from a complete capex into a pay-per-use opex model. Yeah, and then they look at the economies of scale from AWS, which allows you to ride on the scale with the lower cost. Yeah, and then the third comes the pricing model, whereas you look at some stable workloads, you give a long-term commitment. Anything that you need to keep it 24/7, 365 days. Why do I have to keep it on demand? Why do I have to pay on a pay-per-use model? Anyways, it is going to be running 24/7. I might as well give a commitment of 1 year or 3 years, and then leverage the cost benefits anywhere between 40 to 60% right up front. Yeah, and as you grow bigger and bigger, and as you add more and more workloads, you save more because even in the cloud infrastructure, you also have certain shared workloads, things like your active directories, your perimeter security infrastructure, your backup infrastructure. So a lot of those common infrastructure you can now then cross leverage. So as you grow bigger and bigger, you save more and more on the cloud infrastructure. Somebody, Sunana, can you put somebody on mute? There's a background noise. Serena?
Hi,
There's
Dan.
background
I'm just
noise.
figuring out who it is. Just 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on. So how do we do the cost optimization modeling when we engage with customers? Yeah. So traditionally, when you do your IT infrastructure design, the TCO for your IT infrastructure, let's just say this is your X is your cost running your workloads on the data center. Now, when you do a simple lift and shift to AWS, you will see a certain amount of savings. Yeah. So this is bare bone savings. The savings would be very conservative. It doesn't give you sort of a huge bump or the wow factor in terms of your cost savings. Yeah. So this is what you would normally see in many of the lift and shift, workload migrations. So where we tend to stand different, where we tend to make a difference with our customers, are that stage one of the optimization, right when we migrated over, we look at various aspects. Yeah. So these are not exhaustive list, but some of the key ones. For example, do an instance right sizing. Just because you've got a 4 CPU 32 GB machine on premise, when you do a lift and shift, you don't necessarily have to, provision exact same like to like machine. You got to look at the utilization, what is the actual usage profile of a particular workload, and accordingly you do the right sizing. um, Leverage the elasticity of the hyperscalers. For example, um, you have a web farm with say 6 nodes, a web tier web nodes in your web tier. Yeah. So when you move over to the cloud infrastructure, you don't necessarily have to provision all 6 web servers right from day one. So you got to leverage the elasticity of the cloud platform. So you might start with just 2 web servers just to give you a bare bone, keeping the lights on. As your traffic increases, the web farm can automatically scale into 2 can become 4, 4 can become 6. Based on the thresholds we can define, we can increase, decrease. Yeah. So now I'm still getting the background noise.
Um, Maybe if anyone is on not on mute, please can you just verify and can you just mute yourselves, please? Um, yeah, I think Dan it has stopped.
Okay, thank you. Apologies for that. Okay, so back to the discussion. So you leverage the elasticity. You leverage the core, the key features what these cloud vendors bring to the table. So you leverage AWS's say auto scaling group. So you can go from 2 to 4, 4 to 6. So we tend to look at those aspects and design the target architecture by leveraging that. And third is, for example, the storage optimization. Just because you've got, say, 20 terabytes of storage on premise, when you move over, you don't necessarily have to provision 20 terabytes of storage capacity for your data set. So we look at what are those data, how it's being utilized by applications and by users, and accordingly we do data classification or a storage classification and assign a proper types of storage in the target environment. So that can give you a lot of cost savings um, right off the bat. So this is say stage one, is one-time activity when we onboard a customer into an AWS environment. We do this. Yeah. Now on an ongoing basis, how do we continue to save more and money, more and more money? Yeah. So, because see, unlike the traditional infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure always gives you the opportunity to improve upon. There is always room for cost savings. There's always room for improvements in several different ways. So on an ongoing basis, especially the customers who've signed up, managed services agreement with us, we monitor the workloads, the usage pattern. We create a usage behavior pattern for every single workloads, and over a period of time, we look at trends and make recommendations for cost savings. Yeah. And also, we recommend to our customers to leverage some of these latest technological, improvements, such as serverless architecture. A simple and a most common use case is your websites. If you're running a static website, you don't necessarily have to run them on an EC2 instance. You could potentially run them off of your S3 storage bucket, right? Even if you have um, sort of a transactional website, right? We could still design a complete end-to-end architecture without having to have a persistent layer as an EC2 instance. We can have them. Your business logics can be put onto a Lambda function. Your web tier can be implemented onto an API gateway. So it handles all your get requests, put requests, and the content can be all your static content or assets can be served directly from the S3 bucket. And using the CDN, your caching, global caching edge network, we can keep these assets closer to your customers. Could be an image file or a video file or a JavaScript file. So any assets that you use in your HTML page. So this is one of the most common use cases that we see for the serverless architecture design. And then ongoing managed services, we find ways to improve cost efficiencies. Now, getting into the strategy part, right? If you look at it, again, this is not an exhaustive list of strategies, but these are the ones which are most commonly used. Um, Starting with right design, going with automation, reducing a lot of manual effort, um, implementing a proper lifecycle management for your storage, for your applications, for resources especially. Modernize your workloads, modernize your applications, so you don't have to maintain a persistent layer all the time, 24/7. And also, one of the most common strategy and a very widely used strategy, which is commitment based, usage based commitment. If you have stable workloads running 24/7, based on certain commitments, you can leverage certain cost benefits that are offered by AWS. We'll go into each one of those in detail in the subsequent section. So let's start with the right design. Yeah. So even if it is a greenfield or a brownfield, there is always a room for improvement at the design layer, right? So it could be a simple three-tier architecture, um, but but there are a lot of areas we can improve upon. We don't leave any stones unturned. Um, we look at from a high availability, fault tolerance standpoint. We look at the licensing aspects. We look at the auto scaling elasticity aspects. So you look at various things and do the right design. Don't just simply We don't just simply do a lift and shift. If you do a simple lift and shift, as you saw early on, the cost savings is not going to be very impressive. You might end up in having a bare bone or a very conservative cost savings, but then when you do the right design, be it a greenfield or a brownfield, you will definitely see a huge improvement in terms of your cost. Then comes the right sizing. As we discussed earlier, you don't necessarily have to, just because you've got a 4 CPU, 32 GB RAM machine on premise, you don't necessarily have to provision exact same spec on the cloud infrastructure. So you might have provisioned that for your considering your 3-year, 5-year growth. But then when you come to the cloud, the agility and the flexibility characteristics of the cloud infrastructure is something that we need to leverage to reap the benefits of true cloud infrastructure. So right sizing, again, it is extremely critical. So the way we do it is when we do the migration, generally there are tools and mechanisms that we employ to create a right usage pattern for a given workload. Basis that the peak and the troughs, mean, median, average, and we would take the 95th percentile, and accordingly we create a profile. Based on the profile, we allocate the right machine size, be it an M series or a C series, with say instead of 4 CPU, you might go with the 2 CPU, 16 GB at a bare bone, and then burst capacity up to 32 GB just to handle your peaks or peak seasons. Yeah. Then comes the right services. For example, if you're running a 2-node cluster just for your SQL database, you don't necessarily have to set up two EC2 instances across two AZs with always on availability group for your SQL server. You could potentially consider an RDS, which is a relational database service, database as a service. It's a platform as a service from AWS for database workloads. You could potentially leverage those. You could leverage Active Directories. If you have Windows Active Directory on-prem, you're looking at migrating them over. You don't necessarily have to consider running them on EC2 instances, say primary and secondary, managing the forest and all. You then, if you consider utilizing or using Amazon Directory Services, it's again a platform as a service. All the fault tolerance, high availability, the managed services features and everything is embedded within that. So you don't have to, break your head. You don't have to, spend more money to, again, build fault tolerance on top of an infrastructure which is already for, highly available and highly fault tolerant. Then the right platforms. Essentially, the elements of the core benefits of the platform, AWS platform, things like elasticity, leveraging the auto scaling groups, and other core features of the AWS platform, leveraging the benefits of the platform will also help you save costs. So, all in all, if you look at it, there are multiple aspects that we generally go through to do the right design, so you don't end up in incurring a cost, unnecessary cost, by just doing a lift and shift. Then comes the automation part, wherein things like resources, you're running a dev and test workloads, again on on-demand mode and for 24/7, 365 days. Can we do an automation there? So, say for example, I want to keep the machine running 8 o'clock from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. My developers come in at 8:30, so I preempt 30 minutes earlier. I start the machine, and then my developers sign out at 7 o'clock. So I give it a grace period, and I shut them down at 8 o'clock. This can also be done based on the traffic and the workloads. When the last developer signs out, connection gets terminated. That can also be automated based on the workloads as well. So imagine a scenario where you're keeping the machines up and running only between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., which is like 12 hours in a day. So instead of you running at 24/7, you're bringing down the usage to 12 hours. That right there can give you 50% of the cost savings. Yeah. Same with, let's just say, Redshift clusters. So Redshift is one of the data warehouse, next generation data warehouse offering from AWS. Is one of the best data warehouse I've seen so far. Especially for the price point, what it comes to you. So things like Redshift clusters. It's a data warehouse being utilized for reporting and dashboarding and analytical workloads. They don't get utilized during the weekends. So do we have to run the cluster with the peak capacity? Can we look at ways to scale them down? So that also helps you to bring down your cost. And then unassociated or unutilized resources. And this is where a lot of customers end up in bleeding a lot of money. So they, for example, they would have provisioned set of instances. They would have deleted or sunsetted the EC2 instance, but then the associated EBS, or what we call elastic block storage, which is the disk image of that particular EC2 instance, or the IP address of that particular instance, would still be left, you know, there, sort of orphaned or unattached to any of the resources. You would still incur the storage cost. You would still incur, you know, the IP cost for the IP address on an ongoing basis. So this is another area where doing a proper housekeeping and monitoring the resources and removing them, on time, can save you a lot of money. The third aspect on the lifecycle management, especially when it comes to storage, there are several different ways you can manage your storage costs. You don't necessarily, especially in the concept of storage tiering, you don't necessarily have to provision high-end storage. You can look at ways to bring down your storage cost as well, and also leveraging your retention, managing your retention policies properly. Anything over 30 days, have an automation rules which will clean it up, and bring down your storage cost. Application modernization. This is where one of the points that I talked about earlier. Modernize your application so you don't necessarily have to, just because you're doing a forklift from data center to cloud, you don't necessarily have to run everything on a virtual machine or EC2 instance. You can leverage some of these serverless functions, or containers, or microservices, where you're modernizing your applications. For example, there's one particular customer have moved his transaction web application onto a serverless function, what we call Lambda, and an API gateway. So they've been able to bring down the cost by 90%. So assume scenario where they were paying, say, $10,000 in a year for that particular application. The cost has gone down to 1,000. So because Lambda function gets triggered only when there is a request, right? And you get charged, a small fraction, when these Lambda functions, get executed. And these things are short-lived. They live only for the period the transaction is getting executed. Once the transaction is done, they die, and your data is stored persistent in your backend database layer. So you can, with Lambda function, you can make connections to SAP. You can, do automations with your core ERP systems like, SAP or Oracle or ECC, Microsoft AX. So, we help customers to, leverage some of these application modernization techniques, so they can bring down their cost as well. Yeah. And the last option, and not the least option, like I said earlier on, this is one of the most commonly utilized method or used method for cost savings, which is commitment based. So if you have any workloads that are running, 24/7, 365 days, and they're stable, you might want to consider going into what we call reserved instance purchase. So you pay upfront, or you give a commitment upfront, but then you can choose to pay either upfront or partial upfront, or on a month no upfront, but then pay on a monthly basis. So based on the commitments, AWS can give you savings anywhere between 40 to 60%, depending on the workloads. Yeah. So with that, I will conclude the presentation, and then I will move on to the live demo. So for this, I would like to invite my colleague Sharon to take over the presenter rights. Excellent.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. So, as in Citrus, we focus on cost optimization on 4 pillars. That's how we do cost optimization for our customers. Uh, to start with, the initial step, what we're gonna do is on a wastage tracking. So, in this step, we focus on what are the unutilized resources on running on our account on AWS account. We find out those resources and fix those issues. This can potentially save up to 20% of your cost. So we have a tool which we can use, which we use across our customers to find out where are we spending a lot of money where resources are unutilized. So we can run it across multiple services on AWS. I can show you on the EC2. As you see on my screen, we have elastic IP addresses which are not utilized. That means EIP which are not in attached state with any of the machine, or EIP which are attached with a non-running EC2 machine. This could cost you an amount which we can go resolve it. So we have the capability to remove this right direct from our console itself. So I can select whatever resources are unutilized. I can go directly fix it from my console itself. So also we can look at the EBS volume which are not attached, unused network interfaces, underutilized utilized EBS volumes, which can potentially save cost, potentially save on our cost spending.
So, quick question, Sharon. So this is just to for the benefit of the audience on the call. So this is a tool that we internally use as part of our managed services. So we also use AWS's native cost optimization tools as well. So AWS do offer a lot of tools natively, which you can leverage. But then over and above, as part of our managed services program, we use these tools. So this is one of the automation tool or cloud management tool that we use, where we bring complete transparency and a visibility into your AWS infrastructure. Yeah. So what it does is it scans through your complete infrastructure, comes back and gives you recommendations in terms of your cost optimization, in terms of your security posture, and also recommendations. Not just doing an analysis and giving you a report, but also we can present or give you recommendations. Yeah. So this is what you need to do. By doing this, you're going to save this much of money, or by looking at the security posture, by having this vulnerability, these are the potential impacts that you're going to have in your cloud infrastructure. Yeah. So one of the thing what Sharon is showing here is one of the demo account that we have, is being able to scan through and pull up all the unused resources, the resources that for which you're paying, but you're not utilizing it. So the things I talked about, like you have an EBS disk. EBS disk is your disk that you attach to your EC2 instance. You have deleted the EC2 instance, but you forgot to delete the disk. Um, so as long as the disk is still there lying in your account, you would still be paying to AWS for the storage cost. You would only be removing the compute cost, but the storage cost continues to carry on. So by with our tool, you will be able to get list all the resources that are sitting there and sort of orphaned, but not utilized. You can get a report and you can take a corrective action as he's shown. You can take corrective actions right from the console itself. So how does it work, Sharon? In this case, you're seeing all the resources. So without having to, are you saying without having to go into the AWS console, you will be able to, take corrective actions right from here?
Right. So we run this tool on the account with the necessary access using the access
Hmm.
key, secret key to the account. We get a complete overview across the region, across the account on what resources are not utilized.
Hmm.
We have also underutilized resources, underutilized EC2 instances. The complete report we get, and then we also get a recommendation in terms of what to do to fix this.
Got it. Got it. Now, so this you're showing as a one time, right? So what if I want to see it on a regular basis? What if I want to see this report or get this report on a weekly basis?
I can do a schedule a report. So the recommendations, whatever is there, I can schedule a report and send it to the email IDs.
Okay. So can you show me how you do the scheduling recommendations part?
I will add this report into my cart and go to my cart and then schedule under automation a particular report.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
All right. Moving on. The second bucket what we have is scheduling recommendations. So in this particular, this is especially for EC2 machines. Let's say we have workloads, multiple workloads running. Maybe your production is running 24 into 7, but your dev and QA might be running or might be utilized only on a weekdays during office hours. So what we do, we run this tool on your account and find out what is the ideal resources, looking at the different metrics available from AWS, and come back with a suggestion saying, these are the hours your EC2 machine is utilized. We can do an automation where we can go stop and start the machine according to the schedule. So as I ran the report across one of my account, you can see a couple of machines showed up in the account. If I looked at one machine, it will also tell me what is my usage of that particular machine. As you can see on screen, I can see Monday the machine was off. Tuesday first 2 hours the machine was off. What you see in the green is machine is utilized on an optimal usage metrics, and what you see in the gray is the machine was idle or underused. So accordingly, whatever the reports we get, we can schedule an automation which says switch off my machine on Sunday and Monday, get my machine back on Tuesday. This automation can be done directly from the tool. You can apply across machines depending on the tags, multiple tag value, whatever you have available. I can do a single automation, single schedule for across an environment.
So this is one of the machine where you have implemented the scheduler. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So this is one of the point I was mentioning earlier, where if you have dev test workloads and you wanted to automate the start and stop of these workloads so to save costs, we can do it through this tool.
All right. So this, we can run this wastage tracker and scheduling recommendation across the account and find out what are the resources, what are the EC2 machines ideal under which hour, which day. So accordingly, looking at the report, we can then generate an automation script which is scheduled on the same tool to stop and start your machines. Third thing will be right sizing. Now, looking at the enterprise workloads, we have production workload running. We have QA, UAT test workload running. Now, to do a right sizing, it's important to know what environment the workload is running. Now, if it's a production machine, we'll have to look at what is your CPU peak utilization. When you do a right sizing for your QA or dev workload, you can look at what is the average CPU utilization and find out what is the best optimal instance size or VM size for the machines. So we can do all this automation from our tool where we select. We look at peak utilization for workload. I can use resource tags to find out or segregate the machines, let's say production machines, uh, and then look at what number of days or last how many days I have to look at for the finding out the recommendation. I can go up to 1 month, I can go to 3 months and find out what is the right size for the machine. I can also configure which metrics I have to look at, CPU deviation from 20 to 80, 20 to 40. So what happens is when you click a set up a metric CPU deviation 20 to 40, if the utilization of machine go above 40, it says you need to upgrade it. If it's below 20, always the deviation, it come and says you can downgrade this machine, you can save the cost here. So also it will recommend what is the best suitable machine according to your workload across the families. So you might be using a T family, T series, and there is a cost saving which you can do using an R series. So you might be using an R5, the old generation, where we have a new generation R5D where we can use and save a lot of cost. So all this mix and probabilities we can do on the filters and then find out what is the best optimal machine to save the cost. I can also include or exclude existing RIs. So if you have an RI already reservation already running on your account, I can exclude those to find out what are the remaining machines and where I can optimize. Now, once I run the report, I will find what are the machines I need to upgrade, what are the machines I need to downgrade. You look at the machine for a downgrade, it will tell you what is the current machine T3X class, and looking at the current utilization, it will suggest you what is the machine that you can use. We have a suggestion here, R5 large or R5D large, and how much it costs in different payment plans. So once we look at the report, we can directly do a downgrade from here. So you can select the machine and do a fix from the machine itself, which will save you the amount optimal saving.
Excellent. So what you're saying is, by workloads, by departments, you can create a profile, a utilization, a usage profile, and based on the usage profile, you can generate a customized report, either going into the each department or going into the IT manager or the CTO, saying these are the potential savings that you could have in your cloud environment.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And it's quite interesting that has the intelligence where you can even eliminate RIs, because all of these things don't apply for RIs, right? Because you've already given a commitment and you've already taken a cost benefit. So switching them on or switching them off don't really give you the cost benefit. So it's interesting that you can eliminate RIs as well. Focuses only on the ones where there is a real cost savings that are possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Excellent. So how do I
For
do this? Long-term savings.
long-term savings are commitments, which is a reservation on your machines. This RI recommendation we do in the last stage because we need to remove the unutilized resources, schedule the machines which are not utilized, remove unwanted volumes, IPs, and then do a right sizing, which is important, and then we go for a commitment. Once we do a right sizing, now we know what is the optimal size of machine needed for the application. We need to run for 24 into 7. Now we go for that particular machines to do a commitment. Now commitment also, we can do a lot of filters where we use tags and find out which department, which environment we want to do commitment. Also I can mention what commitment I want to do, 1 year or 3 years, and it will give you the cost accordingly the same. Different RI type, standard or convertible, we can also select that. And a payment method, upfront or half upfront, or complete all upfront, partial upfront, or no upfront. So all these three methods are available. And also we have something called normalization. So this is an interesting factor here. Normalization, what it does, I can do a reservation on my same family. Let's say I have two M4 large machine running for 24/7, and I have to do a reservation. Instead of doing an two reservation for M4 large, I can do a reservation on M4 2x large. So which will save again a little more than what you reserve for 2 M4 large. I can also include that factor into the picture and then get a recommendation in terms of what I have to do for my reservation. So once I run this report with filters on what reservation, what is my payment terms, what is my normalization factor, I get a report directly here, and which will tell you how much would it cost in each month on a different payment model. Uh, and then we can generate a report according to this, and then directly reserve the machine from the console.
It's quite interesting. Quite interesting. So apart from the cost optimization, what are the other areas that we can, through our managed service, what are the other areas that we can support customers?
We have a lot of other features. We do have a security automation features where we look at compliances, multiple compliances, HIPAA, GDP, multiple compliances available. We can run this across our account and find out what is not compliant. We also have visibility, cloud visibility, what is running on our account, how it's tagged, what is the utilization. Also, we have a cost dashboard which says how much are we spending across multiple workload, across environment, across multiple business unit in the same account. So I can get a detailed granular report in terms of how much are we spending in the same account on multiple business units.
Excellent, excellent, interesting. Thank you, Sharon, for the interesting demo. And all of our premier customers under a managed services program, by default, they get access to this portal, either to the portal or to the report for consumption on a monthly and a quarterly basis. So before I move further, are there any questions, Sunana? Are there any questions in the Q&A section?
Um, Dan, there are currently no questions. However, if there are any questions from the attendees, you may write it on the Q&A section. Maybe we can just wait for 2-3 minutes, and then we can
Okay,
see. Yeah.
fair enough. So while we wait for folks I know we're the tail end of the session. I'll take this opportunity to kind of walk you through the other areas apart from the cost optimization, the other areas where we can help you manage your infrastructure or help you with the cloud journey, um, right from the inception all the way to to manage and support what we call in the industry day zero, day one, as well as day two support. Um, so in terms of, as I said, we start from the strategy to design, to transform and manage, meaning we cover the entire life cycle of your cloud journey. The idea is that we want to make sure that we handhold you and help you, move through the maturity curve. It could be a traditional data center environment or a virtualized environment. But from there, say you're in the maturity model, you're in, say, level two. We help you draft a strategy from, how do we move from level two to level three and level four and level five, where you're completely agile, fully secured and modern workloads, and any disruption or any change, you're completely resilient. Yeah. So
Dan,
uh, yes, ma'am.
sorry, there's actually two questions.
Sure.
One is someone is asking is, does your tool manage to automate EC2, like automate start or stop instance?
The answer is yes. If you just go back or recollect one of the session which or the screens which Sharon was showing, you can turn on, turn off, and automate the EC2 start and stop scheduling. So not only just a manual schedule, as in you go and start stop, but we can also, by looking at the usage profile, the usage pattern of the workloads, we can give you recommendations saying that in the last 6 months, this particular EC2 instance have only been utilized, say, Monday to Friday or Sunday to Thursday. So accordingly, you can take more sort of
Mhm.
data-driven decision.
Sure. And then another question is, can you explain how bandwidth usage is calculated?
So the way the bandwidth utilization is done in AWS is any data transfer that goes in is essentially free, as in any data that you copy into the cloud environment. Generally, AWS do not charge. Any data that you transfer out is charged, and it's a very sort of negligible amount. But there is a calculator. Um, if you if you go into AWS calculator, you put in your estimated utilization or bandwidth traffic. It can give you a projected cost.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Another question is, how do you compare the security between on-premise and cloud resources?
Sure. So the security aspect, you got to look at it from two different angles. Yeah. So comparing data center and cloud, on a the workload in isolation is not really a true apple to apple comparison. You got to look at all the bells and whistles that go in to set up your data center. Now, in case of a cloud infrastructure, um, anything below the hypervisor, anything underneath your tenant, it is AWS's responsibility. They will take care of it. Yeah. Whereas anything within the tenant, anything above the tenant, such as your perimeter security of your VPC, virtual private cloud, or your application, or your EC2 instances, everything lies with the customer. So this is what we call it as a shared responsibility. Um, Comparing your data center and the cloud infrastructure, securing your infrastructure on cloud is far more easier. It is far more simpler compared to your data center. So things like denial of service attack or distributed denial of service attack or any vulnerability, exploitations. All of these things are proactively monitored by the cloud AWS, but at the same time, they also give you tools and features to secure your infrastructure in a much simpler way. Things like security groups, things like your WAF, things like your AWS Shield, which gives you a complete protection on distributed denial of service attack or denial of service attack. Uh, so securing your cloud infrastructure is far more simpler compared to your traditional data center.
Um, okay, and then there's another question. They're asking, during explanation you mentioned that we can schedule instance working time, but does this really apply for RI?
No. Like I said, the RI, anyways, you have given the commitment. Even if you switch off, you're not getting any cost benefit. So that's one of the reason why we do this exercise of long-term commitment, wherein we analyze the workload, especially if the workload is unknown. We analyze over a period of say 2 months or a quarter, and then give recommendations saying that you don't have to give a high capacity instance. You might want to look at a low end instance because you're not consuming all the resources. So So the simple answer is the switching off, switching on for reserved instances don't give you any cost benefits. So, but you know, we won't recommend blindly going and taking an RA unless you know the workload usage profile very clearly. So in case where you don't understand the workload profile, we recommend that you do a 3 months of study at least, and then based on the usage profile, you go and pick the right instance and go and purchase the RI.
Okay. Dan, another question is, are there any COVID-based offers on the subscription that we're running?
Yes, there are. There are offers from AWS. There are offers that we're also giving to our end customers. So any new customers for AWS Workspace can say, for example, up to 50 workspaces for the first 3 months. You get it for free of cost. As long as you're a new customer, you're opening a new account, you get that benefit. And from Citrus, we do have a lot of on an ongoing basis. We do have a lot of offers. Offers such as we're offering free managed services for new customers when you sign up 12 months contract. Again, same workspaces. We offer free deployment service, free assessment service. So I understand, these are difficult times. We definitely want to, help you as much as we can. So, we've been actively running a lot of campaigns on the virtual desktop infrastructure, running a lot of campaigns around managed services and support, a lot of offers around consulting as well.
Okay. So I'll just ask two more questions. The rest of it, if they want to reach out, maybe they can reach out to us.
Sure.
So one more question is, does it also provide compute utilization report? If yes, then is there any separate integration to be done?
Maybe Sharon can answer that question. Sharon, do you want to take that one? Sharon? Okay,
Sharon,
I'll take that. So the simple answer is yes. By default, we connect into the CloudWatch and we take the CloudWatch metrics and we give you the utilization profile, CPU and disk. Memory is, of course, it's not something that CloudWatch is able to capture because it's in the customer's environment or responsibility. Whereas with our managed services, we generally do a third-party integration, as in we do a third-party tool monitoring tools. So we capture other metrics such as CPU, memory, disks, application availabilities, website availability, and there are other metrics we create custom probes. So with this tool, you get the CloudWatch based utilization metrics. But outside of the tool, as a third-party tool, we do implement a monitoring tool, and we give you more granular and a long-term utilization reports using a third-party tool.
so the last question I'm going to ask for today's session is, so one of the customers is already using a hosting service for their domain services. Now he wants to know what are the steps for moving to AWS. For example, what he's asking is, what is the comparison? And EC2 is his option for standard hosting needs. So yeah, if you can
Okay.
answer that.
Sure. So if you're hosting it, either in a co-located environment or another hosting, we can extend that as long as there is a connectivity. So we can extend that, make the AWS domain controller as part of the same forest. We can do a primary, secondary, and have an active synchronization. So even if the primary goes down, we can utilize the directory services running on AWS to take over and help with the authentication and authorization. And so, to a point, if you decide to completely migrate to AWS, So then you can promote this to primary ID, and you can disconnect your existing on-premise Active Directory.
Sure. Then just one more last question.
Sure.
One of the customers asking is CloudWatch is unable to manage memory. Can this tool report?
If CloudWatch has the scripts enabled and it is able to pick up, then we should be able to pick that up in this tool as well.
Okay. Sure. I think those are the questions for now because we are running out of time. However, maybe you can show the customers or the contacts who they can reach out to.
Sure. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them, continue to drop them in the Q&A section, leave your contact. Definitely, we'll drop you a note with a detailed response, or you can always, pick up your phone, contact our regional sales team. So these are the gentlemen that you see on your screen are your point of contact from a sales perspective or from a pre-sales perspective. Please reach out to them, drop them an email. Um, definitely be happy to answer all the questions. Any questions about any offers or any ongoing promotions, please again feel free to contact any one of these gentlemen, depending on wherever you are. If you're in Saudi, Islam, use your contact. If you're in UAE, you could reach out to Rahul or Ashish. Outside of UAE, you can reach out to Harpreet, or even to Ashish or Rahul. We'll be happy to support you. Just one last thought. We're all in it together. We certainly understand. These are difficult times. We definitely wanted to help you to continue to drive your sort of you know theme and momentum within your IT organization, help you achieve the goals. By making you successful, we believe that we will also become successful. Yeah, with that, um, I will sign out. Thank you very much again for staying this long. Thank you for taking time to join us on this webinar. We will be continuing. We will be doing more and more of these in the subsequent days and weeks. We'll definitely send you a shout out or a calendar invite. Feel free to join in if time suits you or if the topic is of any interest to you. Again, thank you very much. Please stay home, stay safe, take care of yourself.